Welcome to episode 81 of Everything Business Consulting. Today I'm excited to interview Amanda Morgan. Mandy is an unsung hero of ConsultX, having worked as a director for over 10 years to get it to where it is today. Now, this is the first time she's been in front of the mic on this podcast, but I can assure you she's an expert on business consulting and helping our network members and their clients to succeed. Mandy, are you revved up and ready to share your knowledge and experience to help our audience?
Absolutely, Julius.
Terrific. Now, before you're a part of ConsultX, you were instrumental in building a number of companies. Can you tell me about your education and path to understanding and growing businesses?
Sure. Okay, so I grew up in a small town just out of Auckland, and had a desire right from quite a young age to get out of there, which is ironic because now I'd live back there in an instant. But yeah, it was a very small-minded, and everyone knew each other, and I just wanted to get out. So I knew that I had to have some sort of career that was going to get me out of there. My dad was self-employed, and my mum was a teacher. So while she worked really hard and long hours, she still had quite a lot of flexibility and, ability to have time off when I was a kid. So I was very familiar with flexible hours. I wasn't brought up in a 9-to-5 household. So that was quite foreign to me, 9 to 5. Anyway, so I'm in high school, and I did a bit of mucking around.
Mandy?
Got good grades and stuff, but came to end of my second to last year of high school, and my parents said, you're not going back just to muck around. So all I knew I wanted to do was own my own business. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I did marketing at uni, and it's ironic because I tossed up between doing desktop publishing and a marketing degree, and desktop publishing is just not even a thing now.
We were watching a movie the other day from the late 90s, and I can't remember what the movie was, but the main actor asked one of the other characters, are you computer literate? And it's like, that seems like such a funny question to ask only 20 years later.
So I did marketing, and I went to the city and did it. So I had this hour-long commute every day into the city, but loved being in town and stuff. And I worked for my dad part-time, so he had his business. By that stage he was a builder, so by that stage he had actually moved into building software for builders. So I worked for him doing his accounts and things, just because the accounting side of things just came naturally to me. Because I had always wanted my own business, I was just really interested in that sort of thing. So I did his accounts, and one year hadn't finished my degree, so I was in like year 3 or something, and I took Dad's accounts to his accountant, and he offered me a job. Anyway, it was quite big money when I'd been a student for 3 years, and so I took it. And he said he was going to let me continue studying, but I needed to do some accounting papers as well. I thought I was a pretty big deal that I'd landed this job, and hadn't even finished my degree, and was getting good money and stuff.
What was the job?
In the accounting firm. So in a
what was the role?
It was just a junior accountant. Yeah. But I had no real accountancy knowledge, formal knowledge. But he said he would give me this. If I came, I had to do some accounting papers. So that was fine. I decided I was going to do a double degree in marketing and accounting. And it seemed like the dream opportunity, good money, get to study and stuff. Anyway, when I got my first paycheck, he had deducted the hours that I'd been at uni, and I just had no idea of that was going to happen. And I remember that I made my mum buy me all these flash clothes to wear to my job, and I had to pay her back, and my first paycheck didn't even cover like what I had spent. So that was a real eye opener, that working for someone else and having someone else control my income was not for me. Yeah. So at age 18, I think I was at the time, I'm not cut out for this.
It's not gonna fly.
No, but I stayed and I got an insane amount of experience, but I started taking clients on the side. So one of the things that frustrated me about the accounting firm was that they didn't have any real interest in helping the business owner. So when the business owner would come in with their big shoebox of receipts, because back then accounting programs like Xero and things were quite, they just didn't exist. So the self-employed person would come in with their shoebox, and the accountant actually loved that because it just meant more billable hours. And I just couldn't understand that mentality. So I started doing it on the side and built up quite a good little business on the side.
And what specifically were you doing?
I was actually business consulting, but at the time I didn't know that's what I was doing. So I started this little business called Remedy Business Services, and I predominantly was doing accounts for end of year, but then I started doing the monthly stuff, because if it was done right during the month, then it was good for at the end of the year. But because so many of them were just in a muddle, I actually was business consulting, even though I was, so young and things. But I think just I was so motivated and passionate about it, and I became like their little, I don't know, reminder person. So I'd remind them when they needed to pay tax. I'd remind them, and then I was good at marketing, so then I started doing the marketing stuff, and I predominantly had tradespeople. Okay. Which I had thought they were the ones that were being left out because they were really good at their trade, but they didn't want to really have anything.
I don't know if much has changed since
No. But I just became anything that they wanted, because I was so young. And I didn't care if I worked every hour under the sun. Anyway, so that grew quite big to the point that I could leave my job.
Yep.
So I left my job and did that full time. But then I was making really good money, but I had all this free time because my clients only wanted to see me after work and on the weekends. So then my parents kind of said to me, "This is not good.
What are you doing, Mandy? You're not working enough."
Yeah, you've got all this. You seem to have all this free time during the day. We think you need to get a job. So I went back into the workforce, and I got a job as a financial controller for a convention centre, and I kept my clients on the side again, and that was great. Got a whole lot more experience in a different industry, and that company was owned by BHP, so I got experience with a really big corporate as well. Anyway, I then became the general manager of that company, and then I sold my business because I couldn't do. So I couldn't do both. Yeah. And then I met the wonderful David Thexton, and we. I think that's one of the things about David and I, is that we've got that common thing about business. So we then became life partners and business partners, and have gone on to have a number of businesses. It's a curse, and it's not. It's really good that we talk so much about business and stuff like that, but then I don't know, it's our whole life is business, so I don't.
It's a bit like me and Ashley. We'll go for a walk at 9 o'clock at night, and I'm ready to wind down, and she's got some fantastic marketing idea that she won't let me not hear.
But I think it's good because you both understand the pressures that you've got, so I know so many other people that are in business where the partner wants them to go on holiday or take time off or something, but you can't. So at least you understand. Yeah,
there's that common ground, that common understanding between the both of you. When did you make the decision that you were going to get involved with what became ConsultX?
It just because I've got an accounting background, I always seem to gravitate to that. So even when David and I had made decisions to do separate things, I always end up doing the accounts. Yeah. So and then it just grew from there, and then so I just weasel my way in, I suppose. No, I don't know. It's so it wasn't a conscious decision. I start by doing the accounts, and then it goes from there.
And what other roles then have you played at ConsultX?
In the beginning, I just started doing the accounts, and then I took over the marketing, and I would coordinate all the marketing, because back then it was, newspapers and things, so that was quite a big job. And I used to really go through the results of what the marketing was and measure it and stuff. I used to organise the webinars and really primitive version of emailing out to people, and so got that all going, and then found Infusionsoft, which I fell in love with, and
Infusionsoft is a marketing email CRM, for those that don't know.
And went to Oz and did a week course on it. So that then started using that a huge amount within the business. So for prospecting for clients, for the guys in the network, and for looking for people to join the network. And then it just evolved into mentoring people, and because by that stage I'd had so much experience in the business, and seen so many consultants, what they'd done and stuff, did some mentoring with them, would go on webinars with David, do some training, all that sort of thing.
The area I really want to dive into today, Mandy, is something that I know you're very good at, is the technique of lead generation and marketing called appointment setting. Can you explain very broadly what that is? Okay,
so appointment setting as opposed to telemarketing, it gets confused. So in my mind, telemarketing is just en masse ringing, cold calling people, number after number, not qualified leads, hit and miss. It's got a really bad, name. Everyone's experienced telemarketing calls they don't want to get. So that's telemarketing, as opposed to appointment setting that is really structured, and you're only calling people that you really want to talk to, and you've qualified the information, and you've got a process. You're not just hit and missing people.
And it's more than just a phone call as well, isn't it?
So when I ran the telemarketing transition to appointment setting, yes, we made it a whole process. Okay,
so it starts with a list of leads. Can you tell us where and how you got this list of leads?
Okay, so so we just do some background. So in the beginning, we did do telemarketing. Yep. So we had a room of people making calls, and our consultants would send in lists that the telemarketers would call. Yep. There was a really low rate of getting appointments, and then there was a really high rate of people not turning up to the appointments. Yep. And amazingly enough, sometimes the consultant wouldn't even turn up to the appointment.
Really?
So they'd had so little input into the appointment being made, they weren't connected to it. Yeah. So we knew we had to do something to change that. The other thing was they were meant to send lists in of 100 that they'd researched themselves, but it's human nature just to try and do things as easy as you can, and so they were buying lists. Yep. And that's just, the lists were old, you're calling people that businesses have sold, so you've got the wrong person, and it's just awful.
I had experience with it once, getting a phone call for a business owner But the business owner had died like 15 years beforehand, and
that's just such a bad look.
Yeah.
Like, you've just instantly burnt that.
Yeah, that's never going to end well.
No, and then they're going to tell, especially if you're a business consultant, they're going to tell people. So we knew we had to change that. We had to make them more buy into the leads they were giving to us, and we had to get the conversion rate up because it was just ridiculous. It was costing a fortune to have all these people. So we decided to completely turn it on its head, and we identified who the best telemarketer that we had was, and we pulled them out to the site, and we tested this new system. So we told the consultants that they could only send in lists of 10 at a time, as opposed to before they could send in hundreds.
And over what period would that list of 10 businesses be?
So they could only send in 10 a month.
10 a month, okay.
And so they had to make sure that 10 were really good. And I wanted them to have actually got the business card off that person, so it was 100% the details were correct. And then we wanted them to pre-qualify them warm them up. So we came up with the system that we would send them a lumpy mail thing, which is really corny and sounds...
What's a lumpy mail?
So a letter, a physical letter with something in it so they can remember. So we did chocolate coins. And we sent a letter out. We decided we would target specific industries just to narrow it down. So the first one was mechanics, and so we sent out letters to the 10 people with the lumpy mail in it. So with chocolate.
How personalised were the letters?
Very personalised, 100% personalised, yeah. So even to the point I think we put private and confidential on them. Yeah. They were in coloured envelopes, so they stood out. So we did everything we could so the business owner would remember them. And then we put these chocolate coins in them. We said that so the letter was also targeted to the industry. Mm-hmm. So we talked about that we were working with mechanics in the area. We only had a certain amount of spots, book your appointment. And some people booked straight off the letter, so they rang the consultant. So the letter was so good that they booked straight off the letter. And then the appointment setter followed them up. So her role was 100% just to make an appointment. So she would ring. We had a lady at the time. She would ring, and she referred to the chocolate coins in the letter. Yeah. And funnily enough, which we didn't think of it because we were in Australia at the time, the chocolate coins melted. But it didn't matter. It just gave the conversation, something to chat about. And the appointment setter loved stuff like that, so that she could, because it instantly made you have a rapport with the person, sort of thing.
Have a laugh over it.
Yeah. So it doesn't. I think that's the biggest thing. It doesn't have to be all scary, and the whole idea is that you are actually trying to have a laugh and create that relationship really early on. You're not just like a telemarketer that's just hang up, ringing to someone else.
Yeah, it's not just a number, it's more than that. It's actually talking to someone on the end of the phone.
Yeah, and I think she even got to the point where she asked, did your chocolate coins melt? Because we had someone else, so it was funny. It's something that was...
How does the dynamic work of having a telemarketer call up and then the business consultant not being the person that's had that initial discussion? Is there a bit of a dynamic shift there, and does that work well?
So in the beginning, with the telemarketing, when it was cold, because basically with telemarketing you are just cold calling, that's why we think we had such a low quality conversion of people turning up to the meeting, was because there was no connection. But so the first time they'd ever heard of the business consultant was when the telemarketer was trying to book an appointment with them. Whereas with the appointment setting, they'd already had this really nice personalised letter from the business consultant. So the appointment setter was really just an assistant, of the consultant. So it totally wasn't it wasn't cold calling at all. She was just, and I think what she said was, I'm ringing on behalf of, she would, right at the beginning, she would use the consultant's name. You got my, I think she would say she was the assistant. Okay.
Well, that would make the consultant, I guess, appear even more established and give them more credibility.
Yeah. So it was totally seamless. It wasn't like there was a third party.
Okay, so can you just quickly walk me through the process of how one of the consultants would have got the data for their list and what information they needed of the business owner?
So I used to say to people, because you know how we talk about doing walk-ins, I used to say about walk-ins, there's three. It's never if you don't get a meeting straight away, you can still get the business card, and then you can use the business card for the appointment setting. So it's never a bad outcome when you're doing the walk-ins. And for goodness sake, like, business cards are meant to be given out. Like, because I used to have some people say, well, where am I going to get the information from? And it'd be like, well, they're not a state secret. They're meant to be given out. And if you haven't got them, and you've got kids or whatever, just get your kid to run into businesses and get the business cards. It's so easy to get accurate information. So that's what we did. We wanted them to have actually had a business card that they were getting this information from. Or if they didn't have access to that, they had to themselves ring and get the information. So because I 100% didn't want any dead people being rung or businesses that had sold or no, they moved out of this building 6 years ago or whatever. So that was just a absolute sin if they did that. So that's how they got the information, is from.
And what pieces of information were they looking for? Literally just name and phone number, or anything else?
No, that's all they needed: name, phone number, that they were the decision maker. And the industry.
How would they ascertain if someone's the decision maker?
It'll either say on the business card. Well, generally that will say on the business card, or that you talk to the receptionist and get that information from them. If you're just walking in and getting a card.
Okay. And what scripts seemed to work well in the letters and then the appointments?
Offering the free hour of consulting, and that you had limited spots, that you were working on certain industries. The good thing about when we worked on specific industries was the appointment setter also would get really familiar with the industry, and she could leverage stuff that she had heard on other calls. And then we found that happened too with the consultants, so they were learning every time. So I remember one guy said he went into the first mechanics, and the mechanic asked him a question and he was like, I have no idea what that was. But then the next meeting he brought that up because so that had a real benefit of just sticking to a certain industry, and it gave them a lot of confidence too, that then once you'd done it a bit, then you could branch out on other, on a mixture of industries. You didn't. But in the beginning, it was quite good to just.
And were they specifically only, these consultants only targeting one industry forever, or did they move through different industries?
No, so we did a different, because we wanted to completely take control of it and make sure that it worked. We did do a different industry each month, and I was trying to make it as easy as I could for them. So there was no, reason they couldn't do it. There was no reason they couldn't get 10 names. There was no, pick the industry for you.
What sort of industries did you pick?
So we ended out where we had a list from previous knowledge that we had of what had worked well in previous clients and things like that. So we targeted those people first. So we did mechanics, plumbers, we did things like that. We had we had a list of a calendar of what we were doing, and then we just went from there.
So do you need to use an appointment setter? Sorry, do you need to use a telemarketer when you're doing appointment setting?
No.
How else would you do it?
So we, you might know someone. You might have someone in your family that can do it. We have used our daughter. Allie did it for us. You can use anyone.
Could the consultant do it themselves?
Yeah, once we had built the system and people felt confident with it, they then did start doing it themselves, because it proved that it was so easy and it worked so well that they then did start doing it themselves.
How long would it take to call 10 people a month with this system?
Hour and a half.
What would the typical conversion rate be?
The conversion rate to meeting was really high, like 8 out of 10. It was astounding.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really high. And then if you're picking up one of those, 1 out of 10 as a client. But you've always got them, so they might not convert right now, but at least you've got them in your...
That's pretty good. So for an hour and a half, plus obviously the time getting their details.
Yeah.
That's a very high, seems like a very high conversion rate.
But we also then evolved once we had a bit of a momentum going. Some people, once they'd used my suggested industries for a while, they then would put people that they just met in networking meetings in the system.
Yeah.
So it was making every acquisition method intertwine, interlink with each other. So if you went to a networking meeting, you could then get you could then send these letters out to the people that you'd met the next day, and then you could get the appointment setter to ring in a couple of days. So it just, everything was interlinked. Nothing was wasted. You were making every opportunity of every person that you met.
And do you think it's much better, or there's much difference between using physical mail versus email?
I think we did it for the physical mail, and it's probably even bigger now because physical mail is even less than what it was back then. It just stands out.
Yeah.
They're just so, it just stands out. And especially when you're doing things like a bright coloured envelope and you're putting something inside it.
And did you do any email at any stage through the process?
We did. We had standard emails as well that we had written that went out after the appointment setter had called them.
Yeah.
So it would go lumpy mail, appointment setter, email, and then we had a no for now. So if it had been a no for the appointment setter, we had an email for that as well. And we so the email that went out after the appointment setter had made the appointment just told them a bit more about the consultant and confirmed the time and things like that. And that went to the consultant and to the business owner, so there was no confusion. They knew exactly what they were.
Yeah. And what happened to the people that said no? Did they go on some sort of incubation?
Yeah, so then they just went into our regular email marketing, where they'd get something.
And do they get a follow-up call or anything in the future?
They could go back through this appointment setting system. Yeah, it was a game changer. Like, it just was, from like a 1% conversion, 1% appointment out of 100 people called to 8 appointments being booked out of 10 people called. Like, it was just
That's incredible.
Yeah. But it was all just effort.
Yeah.
And, quality over quantity.
Yeah.
That's just 100%.
That's a massive difference. That's really incredible.
Yeah. No, it was just a game changer. And it was fun. That was the other thing. Like, when I would do calls with consultants, and they'd say, we'd talk about activity and, activity versus results and, all that stuff, and they didn't have many in their pipeline. And it's like, how can you not just get 10 cards? Like, this is just so easy.
Yeah, that sounds really easy.
And then if you're also going to networking events and getting cards, or you're making that a win from your walk-ins, or...
You've talked about specific industries. Did you ever do more generic, like targeting businesses based on a particular area? And if so, how'd that go?
Yeah, we did. So as people became confident to do their own appointment setting, then they would do that. So, and with Infusionsoft, you could bring up a street, or you could search by, so they could search their contacts by a really specific area, and target them.
That's a good idea.
But we had other things, like we didn't just use the chocolates. Like we then went on to using the voucher. Yeah. So we got printed vouchers printed out.
What did they say?
That it had a sample of the the profit leakage calculator on the back. It had a sample of the graph, and it's and then on the other side it said we're giving you a free consulting session to run through that and see where your business fits in comparison with other businesses in the area.
How did that end up?
That was good. The voucher works just as well as the chocolates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't industry specific.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It still had the letter that was specific. Yeah. But the voucher worked just as well. So we then really pushed the voucher. So when people signed up with us under the franchise model, they got a big stack of vouchers. Yeah. Just so it was easy. That just used to really upset me, that people that would do walk-ins and blow their confidence, and I used to say to them, but it wasn't a disaster. Like, you still got the business card. That's a win. Yeah. So don't go in to a walk-in just to get an appointment. Have a list of, have some other wins. Yeah. So a win is getting an appointment, or a win is making friends with the receptionist, or it's not just a...
It's like every opportunity, or every walk-in is like an opportunity to, create a relationship, and whether that's taking away an appointment or taking away a business card, it's a positive no matter what.
Yeah.
So do you have 2 gold nuggets of advice for appointment setting for our listeners?
Quality over quantity is my biggest one.
And can you tell me how you would be targeting quality? What you mean by quality?
Take control of your own data. So have found it yourself. Don't buy lists. There's no shortcuts to good data. And then also keep making sure that the data's fresh, And because you're not working with huge amounts, it's easy to do that. Yeah. So I think we used to do it once every 6 months. I would send all the databases back to the consultants, and they had to check that the data was correct, was up to date, if there'd been any changes. Because we used to manage their database back then.
That's probably good practice anyway. 6 months is a long time, but at least every 6 months go around and see all of the prospects in your area, if you're working on an area-based system, and if you're working on, I guess, more of a business niche type system, just touching base with them anyway, whether it's via the phone or email.
Yep. We used to find, just thinking too, when we were targeting areas, geographical areas, that then when people went to networking events, people had heard of them because someone had mentioned that they'd got this lumpy mail in the, to someone, and it was, that had multiple benefits. It was...
be the talk of the town.
Yeah.
And do you have one more gold nugget for us?
Okay, so in business, I think you're never done with learning, and if you can always benefit from getting someone else's advice, and it could just be the absolute mindset changer that you need.
That's very very important for a consultant to have that mindset.
It is.
You can help someone else and give them some advice. Very good. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mandy. I know your knowledge on appointment setting will have been incredibly valuable for our listeners. I'll have to see if I can twist your arm to get you back on in the future for some more valuable insights about business consulting in general.